the premiere of Soulpepper Theater Company's first play, MOONLODGE, and its connection to our beautiful country we call home. I would like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet today on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we each call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territories of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. Please join me in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we are and can each in our own way try to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Some quick housekeeping notes before we get started. Please make sure to ask any questions you may have in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try to answer as many questions along the way. Now I'd like to introduce Wayne Mangesha, Artistic Director at Soulpepper, who will introduce the play for us today. Thank you so much. Take it away.
Thanks, Chantal. Hi, everyone. As she mentioned, my name is Wayne Mangesha. I'm the Artistic Director of Soulpepper Theatre, and I'm really excited to help welcome you all to this special offering in partnership with Toronto Life, celebrating the premiere of Margot Kane's MOONLODGE, which will be available to stream tomorrow at soulpepper.ca. It is the beginning of 80 plays around the world. It's a journey and an adventure that we invite you to embark on. Each week we'll be going to look at a different country and pick and hear a story from that country. So this series, the new series in the events and offerings is presented in support of Around the World in 80 Plays. And as I mentioned, it's an 8-week global adventure of audio dramas, in-depth documentaries from CBC Ideas, and cultural highlights celebrating the global canon. We believe that theater has the power to transport us, so while we're all at home, we're inviting audiences on a guided tour of the rich theatrical practices of our world. Our Around the World in 80 Plays programming presents 8 audio dramas celebrating the global canon. Works from Russia, India, Argentina, Jamaica, Iran, Nigeria, Italy, and today, Canada. So with each weekly release taking us to another destination, Toronto Life will help you sink your teeth into the culinary experiences of that country. So after you enjoy today's treat, brought to you by Chef Joseph Shawana, we invite you to join us for MOONLODGE, a poignant story of self-determination, and enjoy a curated selection of Canadian cultural community recommendations from our partner institutions. For more information about Around the World in 80 Plays, you can go to soulpepper.ca. Thanks so much, and I'm going to pass it back to Chantal to tell you a bit more about Chef Joseph.
Thank you so much, Wayne. We are very excited for the launch of your play, and MOONLODGE sounds so amazing. So now I'd like to introduce Chef Joseph Shawana. Thank you again for hosting another amazing class. We cannot wait to see what you have in store for us this evening. Now I'd like for you to take it away. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. And thank you for letting me be a part of this amazing event. So my name is Chef Joseph Shawana. I am the chair of Indigenous Culinary Associations, as well as professor at Centennial College. I did have a restaurant here pre-COVID in Toronto called Coke and Kitchen, where we won numerous accolades, and we made Toronto Life's top list in Toronto in 2019, I believe, or 2019. So today we're just going to be making Frybread. So there's different variations of bannock, Frybread, or scone that it all just comes down to the ingredients that you use. So the main ingredients would be all-purpose flour, some salt, a little bit of sugar, and water. But some people use eggs, some people use milk or cream. But seeing that I'm lactose intolerant, I choose to use water as my source to hydrate everything that's in the bowl. So I made some earlier that I let rise. So this one version is a yeast-based dough. So we're going to start with just a little bit of all-purpose flour. So usually go about 4 cups. all-purpose flour, a little bit of baking powder. So about 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 2 teaspoons of salt, nice granulated sugar. So I usually go about three tablespoons of sugar. And for the yeast, this is the difference between fried bread and bannock. So there's oven bannock that you would put in the oven. There's regular bannock that you would fry in oil or put on a stick over an open fire. And then there's fried bread. So fried bread is a yeast-based dough. So it's just basically just bread dough that you would deep fry and come out golden brown like so. And it's really light and fluffy, so it goes really well with any type of dish that you want to use it for. I'm going to add my water, and then just give it a good mix. Try to incorporate every single bit of flour that you have in your bowl. So you can use your hands for this method. And what you want is like a semi-loose batter. So, and it's just going to rise. And if it gets a little too loose, and that's when you just add a little bit more water. A little bit more flour to it. Then once you get it all mixed well, incorporated, you'll come out looking like this. And then you have to let it rise at least 3 times. Let it rise, double its size, punch it down a little bit more, let it rise again, punch it down. It takes about 4 hours to get to something that looks like something like that. So nice, airy, consistent yeast dough. I'm just gonna make sure my oil's on. So for this oil, you want it you don't want it really hot. You want it at around 300 degrees. You don't want it too hot where the oil is just going to spill all over the place, and then you'll start a fire. But that's how you get the nice golden brown color and the nice airy bread that's inside for this recipe. So, and I always keep a little bit of oil just off to the side so I can grab the dough. Just try to oil up your knife a little bit, because this dough will stick to your hands, and this is the fun part, right? So you can just stretch it out as big as you want. If you like a nice flat piece of bread, fried bread, then you would just put a nice flat dough inside. Or if you want a thicker piece that you would use, like say for a bun. I made some pulled pork earlier, so I'm going to be using that just to make a quick sandwich out of it. As well as we're going to be making a side dish. So the dough is pretty versatile for any type of dish that you want to use it. So, and for the dessert pork sizes, sorry, I'm just going to turn it up just a little bit. You don't want the oil to get too hot, or else it's just going to overflow on you. You can make little bite-sized portions, just like so. My mom came up with this little recipe when we're on the powwow trails. My mother does a lot of powwow trails during the summer, like a lot of Indigenous cultural festivals across Ontario, and she's known for her baking as well as her fry bread. So she came up with these little bite-sized, she calls them powwow bites, where she would just cut them, and then she would make little types of powwow bites styles with just a little bit of cinnamon sugar inside. So, and sorry, got some on my hands, fingertips. So with fried bread, it's very easy for it to really get overcooked on the outside without cooking on the inside. So that's why I always have my oil just on a really low heat. It gives the inside just a chance to cook off and get nice and fluffy and airy. And I use that quick rise yeast for this recipe, just because it likes to I don't have to go through the process of like rehydrating the yeast and then adding a little bit of sugar to get it active. I can just add it right to the flour, mix everything together, and then it rises naturally that way. So always just make sure that the bottom's not burning. But if you're using a deeper pan, I always go for cast iron. So try to use cast iron as much as possible. It retains a lot of heat. So if you have a Dutch oven that you can use, just put like maybe a good 3 inches of oil inside it, and then that way it just will prevent it from spilling over on you.
And chef, what kind of oil do you use in the pan?
I like to use sunflower oil, just because I try to stay as traditional as possible, even although bannock and Frybread is not traditional in our Indigenous diet. I try to utilize as much Indigenous ingredients as possible. So I use sunflower oil versus canola oil or vegetable oil. And I find it has like a little sweeter taste when you cook with sunflower oil. It does have a tendency to really hydrate the bread with a lot of oil content. So that's why I have a nice pile of paper towel here. So when I take these out, I just put them over the paper towel and just sucks out all the oil out of the fried bread. What you're looking for is a nice golden color like this. When you get to that point, just very carefully, just flip it over. And if you have a small pan like I do right now, it's better to just do it one at a time instead of just turning everything over at the same time. That way, all these little bubbles that are forming around here from it cooking, if you do it all at once, it'll be too much and it'll just spill over, and then you'll have a grease fire on your hands. And naturally, they'll like to flip over on their side. So, like if you have a bigger pan, my mom uses a huge one of those roasting pans that you would buy, I don't know, like Canadian Tire. She would just take that pan out and she put it over the fire, and she would fry there. So what this does is the dough, after it cooks at the bottom, it'll slowly turn itself over. So you don't have to turn it if you're making like these little power bites or scone dogs or blanket dogs. That's a hot dog wrapped in this dough that's deep fried. Kind of like our version of a pogo stick. Try to be very careful. Then you can accompany the fried bread, the bites, anything into any versatile ingredient. I remember I did a version of this to make bread pudding, and it came out really well. You had the nice crunchiness of the crust as well as the airy fluffiness of the center, and it complemented the nice rich sweet cream and the royale sauce that you would use to bake your bread pudding in. Just to keep a good eye on this. So yeah, so just use any type of ingredients you want. So there's just use any kind of type of honey that you like. I prefer like a nice light golden honey, like an orange blossom honey. Any wild jams or wild preserves. I just got some store-bought wild blueberry jam here. Usually we have some nice blueberry jam here that we get out of from Forbes Wild Foods here in Toronto. They have fantastic products, as well as some maple syrup that I'm going to drizzle on the Powell bites once they're all finished.
And in case anyone missed any steps, we are recording this event, so we can share the link with you afterwards. A few people were asking if they should have prepared everything before the class, but just so everyone knows, we will share the link with you after this event.
Yeah. So another key thing that you would need for when you transfer, that's what I forgot to mention, when you transfer your dough into another bowl, line your bowl with the oil that you're going to use to cook with. That way your dough doesn't stick to your sides of your bowl, just for easier cleanup at the end of the day, right? Because one thing that's really hard to get out is really stuck on dough, or I don't know if you guys ever made pancake batter at home and then just left the dirty dish in the sink, and then you get to it like an hour later, and it's just kind of like cement that's onto your dish. So this just prevents that from happening. And that's when you just grab your paper towel and then just place it on top, and then that's just going to soak any residual grease off your fry bread. I know my mother we did try this one thing out where in her big pan she made this really large piece of fry bread, and then she just laid it in there, and then she would serve her taco under like a kind of like a family style meal kind of thing during the festivals. And your power bites will be done. Just gonna place them here for now. So when you use it for like a bun kind of thing, just this one's going to take a little longer because it's just a lot thicker and it's a lot more dense. But you do have to keep an eye on it because it does touch the bottom of the pan and it does get a little bit more brown here. So you would end up getting it a little overcooked here. Sometimes it does burn, so just keep an eye on it. Always play around with your heat as well. I'm just gonna try to make another one here. So fry bread itself and just bannock, it's kind of a staple Indigenous food, but it also is really controversial as not being Indigenous. We'll cook it at home and we'll make it at home, but in terms of like at the restaurant, I won't make it or I won't sell it. Because I'm trying to be as true and authentic to our ingredients as possible. A lot of people don't know, like flour, lard, potted meats. You would get coffee, maybe some type of bacon or a different type of meat that you would get in your monthly rations. And when the Scottish settlers were coming into Canada as the fur traders, the Indigenous peoples seen them making this quick bread called then they would just cook it over a hot stone, and they would be called stone bannock. So that's where this really comes from, is from Scottish settlers, and we adapted it into our I guess our culinary history of North America. And when you get your little powwow bites out, then just grab a little bit of cinnamon sugar. There's a little bit of vanilla that's in here as well. Just give those things a toss. Try to coat them. These ones could be served with a little bit of your any type of preserve you have. I have some wild blueberry jam here. Drizzle some nice honey on top. Or if you want, you could just drizzle, toss them in a little bit of maple syrup, and then just sprinkle a little bit of cinnamon sugar on top, and they'll come out really well. So that's where they say always watch your pan, make sure your bannock doesn't hit the bottom of the pan too long. So this one is just overcooked, just on the bottom. So just always play around with your heat. If you're using electric heat, it might be very difficult to adjust accordingly, like on the fly. And you can actually just make this, all the dry ingredients, put them in a bag. And if you're going camping or if you're going hunting, we tend to use a lot of ingredients from home. And then what I would do is I would just pre-package everything before we head out to go hunting for a weekend or for a week. So then that way we just add water or we just reheat everything. So this actually is good in your backpack if you just going out for a weekend. Just quickly mix all the dry ingredients at home, and then while you're out on the trail or out camping, just take it out of the bag. You can actually mix it in the bag too as well. So just pour the water in and just use the bag itself to mix everything, and then just leave it there until it rises, and then you can wrap it around a stick, or you can just lay it on your grill, just like a nice flatbread. If you don't have oil around, or if you don't want to carry around too much oil. And then just grab your there. And four, whoops. So get the knife and do a nice cut. Then what you're looking for is a nice soft consistency inside. Just always just make sure that you let it cool off, because opening one of these things is just like opening up a nice a big steam bubble. And then we just grab our any type of favorite filling. This is what we would use like for burgers or any types of sandwiches. And that would be your pulled pork on your fry bread. For any type of desserts, you would have your like power bites, or if you want, you can actually use this recipe for dumplings. So just make this, and then you would actually have, instead of the really dense dumplings that you would get, you would actually just have nice, fluffy, airy dumplings in your soups or your stews. You can just always have this. I remember a friend of mine would carry around just a couple pieces of bannock in his pocket before we went out anywhere. And then while he was just, all your little kids just running around. I might as well cook off the rest of this day. I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments.
Have you done anything with like a vegetable kind of mix within the fry bread?
Actually, not necessarily, not vegetable, but fruits. Any type of fresh fruit. So I should have grabbed some strawberries out of my fridge. But so you would just kind of make like a pocket. This never use frozen ones though, because there's too much water content in them, and it will actually react with your hot oil. So you just make a little pocket like so, kind of like a dumpling, but a deep fried dumpling. And then you just take your, maybe like a whole strawberry, just put it in there, and then you would just fold it over, just like so. And just give it a nice twist so nothing gets out. And then one trick that my mom always told me is showed me with a little bit of flour and then just turn it over like that. So it just creates a nice seal inside. And actually you'll have like little bannock balls that have like fruit compote, or if you want, you could use like, I would imagine that using like a roasted butternut, maple roasted butternut squash, like a puree, and then putting it inside here would actually come out really well for the recipe.
Those look so good. So a question here from Sean, approximately how long would it rise before punching it down again?
So what you're looking for is for it to double in size each time. So if you have, sorry, a little bit of oil in my eye. So if you're using, let's just say if you have a softball size dough ball. You would put it in a bowl, and if it doubles in size, and that's when you would punch it down a little bit more to rewrap it. Always have like a nice damp cloth over it instead of using saran wrap or anything. Just creates more heat and more moisture inside the dough, so it just rises a little bit better. And then just keep on punching it down, just with your fingers. Just make a claw and then just kind of punch it down and fold it over a couple times, so you're ready to go. And then the second time you can do it, if you like a really good bread that has a lot of yeast in it, so you can actually just fry it if you're using the quick yeast, active yeast. You can just do one punch and then wait for it to rise again and then deep fry it. If you want a more subtle flavor, you won't taste too much yeast, and that's when I would go for like three rises. My mom always does 3 rises. So I know on the Powell Trail itself, those really large containers, the big blue containers, they're about like this big. My mom would make probably about six of those in one day when we're on the Powell Trail, and the sizes that we're making are not even that big. They're probably about the size of this bun. And yeah, she would just be making it every, like, she would get up at like 5 in the morning, and then she wouldn't stop cooking fry bread until maybe 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the evening. And she at the Powell back home on Manitoulin Island, that's a 3-day festival, so it's a pretty big deal. And she does a lot when she's on the trail. She cooks all the time. And when there's nobody to cook for, she'll still have a big meal spread out in front of her.
It sounds like a lot of work, but I'm sure it's all delicious.
Yeah.
So Rolando here has a question, and he says, how deep do you want the oil to be in the cast iron pan? I know you said about 3 inches, but
Yeah.
do you have to keep refilling it?
No, about 3 inches if you're using a Dutch oven.
Oh, Dutch oven.
Yeah, like the big, thick walled ones. This one I probably only went like a little bit, a quarter of the way up on the pan, because you don't want it to overspill. But it also depends on if you're using it for, like, if you're making these Pablo bites. But I barely got any feeling in my fingers, so don't do this at home. So this size here, I would tend to go for a deeper pan for it, or a larger pan, so that there's more surface area for me to cook in. Whatever you're making nice flatbread like this, you can use just your basic cast iron pan that you have at home. Just never overfill it. So always don't go more than a third of the way up in it, because you don't know how much reaction you're going to have with the dough and the oil, and how hot the hotter your oil is, the more it's going to overflow if it comes down to that. So it's kind of like when you cook fries, only have a little bit of oil in the pan before you cook your fries off. Place this down here. Just grab these guys. Just gonna make some more for something to have later. Fry bread for days here today. This is what I was talking about. If you undercook it, you're going to have dough that's not even cooked on the inside. So that's why I always try to do is like play around with my oil as much as possible.
Any tips with oil in general? I know you said that you can't feel your fingers anymore, but when you place the dough in the pan, just so it doesn't splatter everywhere, any tricks and tips that you can share with us?
Yeah, so here, I'll show you actually a nice little trick here. So never just pop it in the oil. Always just try to start from here and then just go away from you. That way, if it does splash, the oil is going to shoot that way instead of shooting back at you here. And what you're looking for when you cook fry bread, what I look for is just these subtle little bubbles around the sides. That's telling me that the oil is just, my mom always just grab a piece of dough like this and she would put it in the oil, see if it bubbles. And if it bubbles like that and then starts rising right away to the top of the oil, that's when it's hot enough. If it just goes in there and just starts fizzing, kind of like when you would drop something in soda, like how soda would fizz if you drop, like, let's say, a frozen berry or an ice cube in there and it just fizzes right away. So that's too hot for this. So you just want to just to be subtle bubbles around the edges. So you're looking for about, if you have a candy thermometer or your oil thermometer, looking for about 300 to 315 for your oil. But it's always going to fluctuate. So once you put your fry bread in there, then it's just going to cool off your oil really fast. So that's when you would just play around with your temperature and watch it. Every time you're dealing with oil, never walk away from your pan because you can catch fire almost instantly if you're not watching it.
Those are some good tips. Here's a question from Melanie. If there are leftovers, how would you heat it the next day so it's still moist inside and crispy on the outside?
Yeah, I would, like, I don't have we don't use a microwave at home, but if you do have a microwave at home and you want to use it, then just grab your fry bread like this, wrap it in your paper towel, and then just put it in the microwave that way. That way the steam will stay inside the bannock itself or the fry bread itself before just escaping. Because if you just do it like this and then just put it in the microwave, then it will get really dry really fast, and you'll have this hard edge around it it's not palatable and it's really hard to chew it. So, or you can just what we do is the next day is we would just cut it like this, and if we're having breakfast, we would just butter one side or both sides, and then just butterfly it and just put it down on your pan to reheat it, and then just a fried egg on top or whatever you want, or maybe that's how you make your avocado toast, or I don't know what the new kids are doing these days, but something like that. So creating something out of the rations that all of this was based on, it's like you're trying to create something out of nothing, right? So, and that's how bannock itself became so versatile in Indigenous foods that it really, I guess, identifies with our roots of how far we come from like 400 years ago until today. But also, there's other foods and food groups out there that a lot of let's just say, for instance, like okra in the South, right? So, and collard greens, how those things became a staple in Southern cooking, and how they were adapted in the diet down there, and now it's a staple in Southern hospitality and Southern cooking styles, all the way down Carolinas to Florida and so forth. So all of that type of food, it was really a food that we had to figure out how to cook with and really try to identify ourselves with where our food came from. So, but in terms of flour and yeast and baking powder and processed and types of sugars, it's not really part of our natural diet, but it's something that is adopted into everyday Indigenous households. Right? So everybody has kokum or nokomis that makes their bannock, and nobody beats their bannock, right? So that's just the way it is. So.
Can you explain a little more what types of ingredients were used before, you had the baking powder, baking soda, all of these ingredients that weren't available? What could be kind of that ingredient that would make it that bread at the time?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different styles. Like there's we didn't have a bread per se, like in art, like where I come from, or the tribes where like my ancestors came from. But we did have a lot of crackers and I guess kind of like quick style of breads. So I guess a corn tortilla or something is a type of bread. But in terms of traditional bread, like wheat flour and stuff like that, we didn't have it. So we would basically we would use birch bark flour. So birch bark flour is the flour itself is the membrane that's in between the tree and the bark. So there's this brown ring that's inside the birch tree that you would scrape out when you're harvesting birch bark. You would scrape out the inner part, and then you would just dry it, and you would grind it down, and then you can use that as any type of thickener or any type of to make like quick thickeners for soups or stews or just any type of I guess quick breads that you have. So flour. There's also a story of Indigenous people using cattails. So the top of the cattails, right when they're just about to die, like pretty much wilter off and release their pollen, the brown stalk that's on top. They would take it. They would just mix a little bit of water with it and make a paste, and they would just line the paste on hot stone. Then they would just peel it off, and they would eat it. And that's loaded with a lot of vitamin C and zinc. Those two, it's just loaded with that. And there's so much other ingredients that are out there that even I'm still exploring. I'm still learning on our vast food system that we had prior to colonization. So in terms of natural active I guess like natural yeast. So you can't use a green pine cone. And what you would do is you would take like a mason jar, like so you would put green pine cones inside, and there you just add a little bit of water, then you would just cover it and just let that sit in the sun for a few days to up to a week. And then what actually will happen is all the natural yeast would start forming and start bubbling to the top. And then you would use that for any type of fermentation or preservatives in your vast like pantry of indigenous foods that you have. And that's actually a natural yeast for ancient alcoholic beverages. So indigenous people we didn't have any type of like alcohol per se to like any type of wines or any type of beers, but still we did have alcohol content that was available that we would make that was available to us for ceremonial purposes. So and those recipes I don't touch those recipes, and I'll try to learn about them, but I won't replicate them and I won't redo them because I don't have I guess the knowledge to pass those recipes down like generations and so there's a lot of respect that you got to have towards your food and where your food comes from and your stories that you're learning and the elders that you're talking to. So there's a lot of knowledge that you need to gather and what type of knowledge you can actually share with other people, right?
That's completely understandable, but still so interesting. And there's a lot to learn there. I know our relationship with maple syrup is close to especially our region. Do you have any kind of background around how that was done in the past? Because I know my grandfather owned land in Quebec and he passed, but he built his own sugar shack and shown me how, you know, it was extracted from the trees and everything. So it's so interesting to see how that works. But there's a lot of history behind using
Yeah, so
sugars and recipes and maple syrup.
yeah, there's a lot of recipes that you can use and you can do with just maple syrup. I know with maple syrup, there's a maple toffee that you can make, a maple, kind of like a maple hard candy, or a chef friend of mine, Chef says, and what she does is she'll get her maple syrup. Like she does maple syrup like every single year at her home in Quebec. So she'll get a pot, and then she would reduce about 4 liters of maple syrup. And what she does is like she'll put it on simmer and she won't stop like stirring it, and then it kind of creates a maple brittle like toffee kind of thing. And then there's a consistency that she looks for, and when they whisk it, you can't use a whisk. You got to use like a wooden spoon and do it, and just zigzag. So you're doing that for about an hour in the pan, and then as soon as you get to that point, you just take it out of the pan and just pour it either on a stone slab or just your baking dish and so forth. Just let it set and stay there, and then it would just come out and break it apart. And then it's almost like hard maple sugar, but when I put it in your mouth, it kind of just melts like the way those old, those really old sponge candies that you would have, that you would get in like clear packages. They would have just like, it kind of looks like a sponge, but then it's like pure sugar. And when you put it in your mouth, you break it off, it just melts in your mouth. So it's similar to that, as well as when they would harvest it, they would just take their axe or their cutting tool and just put a slit, just like hammer one thing, like a little hammer notch. They would just get a little skinny piece of wood, about I don't know, 6 inches to 8 inches big. They would just put it on an angle. They just let that drip in a birch bark basket at the bottom of the ground. And from there, they would take a hollow out log. This was a long time ago, so this was just what I was told. They would just take a hollow out log. They would just put adding hot stones to it. They would take one really red hot stone, add it to the log with all the maple sap. Then once that cools off, they would take it out and then just redo it. Just keep on doing it until it just reduces into what we now know as maple syrup. So that's one way that they used to do it a long time ago. Now everybody has like, we can do it over an open fire, big cast iron skillets, stock pots, or the more commercial route where they would just have all the lines feed into one place, and they would just keep on reducing that down in large, big stainless steel kettles and so forth. So, but that's another ingredient that's very versatile in Indigenous culinary. That's used in that's actually a natural, like it's already preserved. You really don't have to do much to it. Yeah, but there's a lot of different techniques that you can use for that will complement fry bread itself. So like I said, just like the maple syrup, you just take and just dip it in there and dip your pieces of your bread inside the maple syrup and then eat it that way, maybe with a cup of tea and so forth. So it's really the fry bread, bannock, scone, whatever you want to call it. It's very versatile, right? So I like to, when I make it at home, I'll very rarely make fry bread, but I'll always, if I'm making it, I'll make oven scone, like put it in the oven, like oven bannock, and really bring it out, and it just comes like a nice dense piece of bread that has like nice airy bubbles inside. It's really good for stews, and then you just dunk your bread inside your stew.
That sounds so amazing. Don't see any more questions coming through here. If anyone else has any final questions, please jump in and add them to the Q&A box and we'll answer them. But this was fantastic. I could see it's so versatile.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it looks like that's it. You were very clear as to how to make these amazing fry breads, and it looks so delicious. So can't wait to try this recipe. Thank you kindly, Chef, for your time today. This was such an informative class. Thank you, Wayne, to Soulpepper, and to everyone for joining us this evening. Make sure to check out the Around the World Passport, which is your subscription, to not miss a moment of the journey and keep up to date with Soulpepper's programming within the next month via TL Insider. So please stay safe, everyone, and have a good evening, and hope to see you soon. Thank you.